In 20th century America, no other family has held higher status than the Kennedys. The influence of their powerful dynasty was not just limited to politics. Family members enjoyed the same glamour and fame as today's biggest celebrities. To this day, the family is the closest thing to royalty the United States has ever had. But as blessed as they seemingly were, with wealth, power, and good looks. Throughout the years, a series of tragic and bizarre events have forced another darker story into the history of America's royal family. A story known as the Kennedy Curse. The central figure in the family saga was Joseph Kennedy, the founding father of the political dynasty. A multimillionaire by the age of 30, Joseph appeared to have the Midas touch. His boldest plan was to produce the first Catholic president of the United States.
I'm looking forward with great anticipation to my duties here and to renewing acquaintanceship with many old friends.
Joseph used his connections and personal wealth to pass his political ambitions onto his 9 children, particularly his 4 sons, only to see 3 of his sons and 1 of his daughters perish in his lifetime. The Kennedys were blessed with such power that for 64 years there was a Kennedy elected for office in Washington. In the meantime, they were cursed with tragedies ranging from a lobotomy gone wrong, to plane crashes, to the assassinations of both a sitting president and a presidential candidate. Tragedy after tragedy made it difficult to rationalize the horrific events happening time and time again for the same bloodline. America's royal family became the portrait of a family cursed to never fulfill their father's lifelong ambition. The rumors of how the Kennedy curse was cast upon the family draw a direct link with Joseph Kennedy's thirst for power and influence. The patriarch of the clan is an incredibly controversial figure in history. He was born in Boston in 1888 as the son of a tavern owner turned state senator. Joseph graduated from Harvard in 1912, beginning the tradition of Kennedys attending the prestigious university. He was a brilliant businessman, always able to capitalize on opportunities. After graduation, he made a fortune on Wall Street. He also became the only man in the history of Hollywood to run 3 studios at the same time, and accumulated a long list of occupations: stockbroker, a bootlegger with ties to the Chicago mob, Franklin Roosevelt's ambassador to Great Britain, and real estate magnate. With his marriage in 1914 to Rose Fitzgerald, the daughter of Boston's influential mayor John Fitzgerald, he formed the most powerful family of Boston. At the time, Boston was majority Irish Catholic, but Protestants were still in control of the halls of power. It was during this period that Joseph's boldest political aspiration was born. He would become the first Catholic president of the United States. Joseph lobbied hard for his appointment as ambassador to Great Britain, as he felt that the office was the perfect stage to become the natural successor of Roosevelt in 1940.
We give you a very, very warm welcome and hope you will have a happy time amongst us, sir.
Thank you, Lord.
But Joseph's anti-Semitic views ended his tenure in London in disaster, and legend says that these views were also the origin of the curse of his family. Joseph did not want America to be dragged into a war against Germany. He disagreed with Winston Churchill and instead insisted that England should actually ally with Hitler against communists and Jewish bankers. Churchill was angered by Joseph's pro-Nazi attitude. In turn, Joseph started to use the press to voice his lack of faith that Britain was capable of dealing with Hitler. Stunned by Kennedy's polemic declarations, critics claimed that he cared little about the fate of Europe. Late November 1940, he was recalled to Washington. It was the end of Joseph's presidential dream, and tragedy began to descend over his family.
You can't rearm in your spare time any more than you can fight a war in your spare time.
There are several legends regarding the origin of the Kennedy curse. One story says that as Joseph Kennedy was traveling back to the United States aboard an ocean liner, he felt disturbed by some of the Jewish passengers' prayers. Joseph demanded to the captain that they be forbidden to continue. Another version of the legend has Joseph Kennedy visiting Great Britain during World War II when a refugee came to him and begged for help to get his sons out of Europe. Joseph ignored him, and the refugee placed a curse on all the fates of Joseph's offsprings. Another similar story claims that several European towns prayed to curse Joseph Kennedy after finding out that he sold weapons to Nazi Germany. After realizing he would never become America's first Catholic president, Joseph turned to his eldest son, Joseph Kennedy Jr., to carry out his dream. The day he was born, Joseph Jr.'s grandfather and mayor of Boston, John Fitzgerald, proclaimed, "This child is the future president of the nation." Just 1 year before graduating from Harvard Law School, he joined the Navy and began training as a naval aviator. In 1944, he went on a dangerous and secret mission to fly a B-24 Liberator filled with 20,000 pounds of explosives. An electrical fault caused the bombs to detonate prematurely, killing Joseph Jr. He died at age 29 in a war that his father had fought to prevent. But losing the chance to become president himself and the tragic death of his eldest son did not weaken Joseph's ambition. He only grew more determined to produce the first Catholic president of the United States. He turned to his eldest living son for his next attempt. That is how John Fitzgerald Kennedy was chosen to become America's president. John Kennedy described the event, telling a reporter, "It was like being drafted. My father wanted his eldest son in politics. Wanted isn't the right word. He demanded it." Joseph Kennedy would go to any length to make sure his family was seen as fit for power. He mastered the art of controlling public perception of his family and manipulated the press on multiple occasions to bury unwanted accounts of affairs and scandals. One of his most nefarious public relations triumphs was making the world forget about his mentally ill daughter Rosemary, whom, without even consulting his wife, he had lobotomized in 1941 when Rosemary was only 23. The lobotomy left her incapacitated for life, and she was institutionalized until her death at age 86. Despite holding an intensely controversial reputation in Washington, Joseph managed to be a huge influence, working in the backstage and injecting a huge amount of money into JFK's campaigns to the Senate and to the White House. In 1961, Joseph finally achieved his dream. John Fitzgerald Kennedy became the first Catholic president of the United States.
In the greatest story of a momentous year, John F. Kennedy defeated GOP standard-bearer Richard Nixon in one of the closest presidential elections on record.
But the curse struck again, when just under 2 years into his presidency, JFK was assassinated in an event that changed America forever. In 1961, John F. Kennedy fulfilled his father's most cherished wish. He became America's first Catholic president. But tragedy was lurking in the shadows. Not even a major winter storm was able to diminish the tidal wave of hope, glamour, and high spirits that filled the nation's capital for the 1961 inauguration of John F. Kennedy. Washington, D.C. had never seen anything like it. The youngest man to ever become president, JFK was 43 years old when he was sworn into office.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
John had always been a wild young man who liked parties and women. But Joseph had designed John F. Kennedy's political persona to the smallest detail and decided that John should settle down and get married to become a more acceptable candidate to the American people. Joseph chose Jacqueline Bouvier as the best fit for the future president. Jackie was born into wealth in 1929 to Wall Street broker John Bouvier and socialite Janet Norton Lee. In 1942, Jackie's mother divorced her father and married Standard Oil heir Hugh Dudley Auchincloss Jr., who became an important role model to Jackie. Her stepfather gave her a pampered childhood, and Jackie made the most out of it. She became a talented equestrian, spoke 4 languages, took ballet classes, and was an avid reader. In 1952, she was introduced to John F. Kennedy at a dinner party. He was already running for the U.S. Senate at the time, and after winning the November election, he proposed to Jackie. Jackie and JFK were married in September 1953 at St. Mary's Church in Newport, Rhode Island. The wedding was considered the social event of the season, with an estimated 700 guests at the ceremony and 1,200 at the reception that followed.
The wedding of Senator John F. Kennedy recalls Newport's one-time social grandeur. Speaker of the House Martin, Congresswoman Edith Norris Rogers, Senator and Mrs. Leverett Saltonstall, screen celebrity Marion Davies, and former Ambassador and Mrs. Joseph Kennedy, parents of the groom, are among the personalities on hand to make this the top society wedding of the year.
The couple had 4 children, 2 of whom died in infancy. Today, there are many accounts of how unhappy Jackie was in her marriage to JFK. But at the time, nobody outside of JFK's inner circle knew he was a serial womanizer. Jackie even contemplated divorce before her husband became president.
President Kennedy quickly follows up his meetings with President Eisenhower and Richard Nixon by conferring with Governor Nelson Rockefeller. By briefing top Republican leaders on administration problems, the president achieved a bipartisan unity of aims. Terming the Cuban situation serious, the governor called on all to support the president.
In 1956, JFK was partying in Europe while Jackie gave birth to a stillborn daughter. Some accounts have that John only returned to be with his wife when his friend said it would hurt his career to not be with Jackie at that time. Rumor has it that Jackie was so upset that she met with her father-in-law, Joseph, who promised to pay her $1 million not to divorce John. Joseph knew that Jackie was a crucial component in his son's bid for the White House.
El progreso material se puede alcanzar sin destruir los valores del corazón y la mente humana. Viva México.
People noted that the size of the crowd in rallies was twice as big when she accompanied her husband during the campaign for president. After he was elected, Jackie became iconic as a glamorous first lady, and she knew she was responsible for a large part of the love America felt for the young president. 2 years into his presidency, on November 21, 1963, the First Lady and the President left the White House for a political trip to Texas, which would be her first extended public appearance since the loss of their baby Patrick in August. Upon arrival in Dallas, the Kennedys immediately walked toward the crowd of excited people, spending several minutes shaking hands. Jackie was seated next to her husband in the presidential limousine, an uncovered 1961 Lincoln Continental 4-door convertible, with the Texas governor, John Connally, and his wife, Nellie, seated in front of them. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson and his wife followed in another car in the motorcade. Crowds estimated at 150,000 to 200,000 people cheered on the president. By the time the motorcade reached Dealey Plaza, they were only 5 minutes away from their planned destination. At 12:30 in the afternoon, 3 shots were fired at the motorcade, one striking John F. Kennedy in the head. The president was rushed to Dallas's Parkland Hospital. Only 30 minutes after being shot, JFK was pronounced dead.
Within 3 hours after the tragic death of President Kennedy, Newsday published and distributed a special 8-page extra on the assassination free as a public service to its subscribers.
Jackie Kennedy refused to remove her blood-stained Chanel pink suit. This outfit would become one of the most recognized pieces of clothing in America's history, and she would be forever remembered for it. Jackie continued to wear the blood-stained pink suit as she boarded Air Force One and stood next to Johnson when he took the oath of office as president. Jackie Kennedy planned her husband's state funeral, modeling it after Abraham Lincoln's service. she requested a closed casket and led the procession on foot. Here, with her 2 children, Caroline and JFK Jr., the young boy salutes his father's casket. America was glued to TV screens all over the country mourning their president and watching Jackie lead the state funeral. A reporter from the London Evening Standard said of the event, "Jacqueline Kennedy has given the American people one thing they've always lacked: majesty." Here again was the double edge of the Kennedy curse, killing another member of the family, but in so doing, lifting them to American immortality. Few families could recover after such tragedy, and America was bereaved with the sorrow of losing its beloved president. 4 years later, misfortune struck again, and the nation wondered if the fabled dynasty was indeed bound to tragedy. Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated moments after winning the Democratic presidential primary in California.
The United States Senate are entitled to representation in that body by men who inspire their utmost confidence.
John F. Kennedy's presidency created an excitement for politics in the 60s that simply hadn't existed before him. During the Kennedy administration, the United States was at the peak of its power, economically and technologically. Kennedy had promised to put an American on the moon, and while he did not live to see his goal achieved, it was an event that embodied the excitement of the time.
The empty White House is a symbol of this infamous mockery of American ideals of peace and freedom. Peoples of all faiths unite in prayer for the first Catholic to become president.
The loss of JFK was a vicious blow to the Kennedy clan. The ultimate dream had been fulfilled, only to be cut short in the most horrific manner. JFK's death would turn out to be only one episode in the tragic saga of America's royal family. Joseph Kennedy had suffered a stroke in 1961 that limited his influence on his sons' political careers. But this time, the old man needed very little to groom the next Kennedy in line to carry on the dream of the presidency. Robert F. Kennedy was already a beloved public figure when he lost his older brother, JFK. During the turbulent time of the Civil Rights Movement, Robert F. Kennedy became an advocate for equal rights. He gained a lot of nationwide support and was able to recreate the optimism and hope for a brighter future that had seemingly died with his brother and with the murder of civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in April of 1968. Despite his younger brother Ted being against it, Robert decided to run for president. Many feared he would be assassinated, like the older brother he mourned. In 1968, he was the leading candidate for the Democratic nomination for the presidency. He had just won California's primaries when he addressed his supporters shortly after midnight on June 5, 1968, in a ballroom at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. Leaving the ballroom, Kennedy turned to his left and shook hands with busboy Juan Romero just as Sirhan Bisara Sirhan, a 24-year-old Palestinian, opened fire. Kennedy was hit 3 times, once in the head and twice in the back. A 25-hour vigil ensued while America prayed for his life. The nation wrestled with imagining the odds of another Kennedy in that tragic situation. Robert succumbed to his injuries and died at 43 years old. Joseph Kennedy had 4 sons, and with them 4 chances of fulfilling his greatest ambition. Joseph lived to see 3 of those hopes perish in brutal events. Joseph's final public appearance was with his wife and his son Ted Kennedy in a filmed message to the country following the death of his son Robert. Joseph died in 1969 of natural causes, having outlived 3 of his 4 sons and 1 of his 5 daughters. The Kennedy curse was not buried with the patriarch, and even though Ted Kennedy, his only surviving son, did not die tragically, he collected his share of tragedies. On June 19, 1964, Senator Ted Kennedy was flying in bad weather from Washington to Massachusetts in a private airplane. The plane crashed into an apple orchard in the western Massachusetts town of Southampton. Kennedy was pulled from the wreckage by fellow Senator Birch Bayh and spent months in a hospital recovering from a severe back injury, a punctured lung, broken ribs, and internal bleeding.
It was announced that a new canvas frame would be used to speed the senator's recovery, eliminating the need for a plaster cast. Doctors say that it was a miracle that Mr. Kennedy survived the crash.
Ted Kennedy and the whole country believed it was inevitable that he would run for president at some point. Although boosting his presidential image in the years following his brother's death, Ted reportedly said he knew he would be assassinated one day. But as had happened to his father before him, an unexpected event put an end to any of Ted's presidential aspiration. The Chappaquiddick event became a national scandal in the 70s, casting a shadow above Ted Kennedy's public image. On July 18, 1969, Kennedy allegedly drove his car off a bridge and left his passenger, Mary Jo Kopechne, to drown on Chappaquiddick Island in Massachusetts. According to Kennedy's own testimony, after accidentally driving his car off the bridge, he swam free, left the scene, and did not report the accident to authorities for 10 hours.
The death of Mary Jo Kopechne, a Kennedy aide who died in Senator Ted Kennedy's car, may have a decided effect on his political future. He admitted leaving the scene of the accident and appealed to his constituency for understanding.
Meanwhile, Kopechne had died in the car through drowning or suffocation. The scandal saved Ted from becoming president. For a few decades, the Kennedy curse seemed to fade away, along with the memory of the fallen icons. When John F. Kennedy Jr., the handsome son of JFK and Jackie, and his glamorous wife Carolyn Bessette died in a plane crash in 1999, the episode made America relive the curse cast upon the Kennedys.
Much of the emotion here can be felt at the JFK Museum in the center of Hyannisport, where attendance has tripled in the past 2 days. Simple white roses have been placed in front of photographs of John Jr.
Jackie Kennedy had died 5 years before JFK Jr. and was blessed enough to not witness the loss of another child. Throughout her marriage to JFK, Jackie tragically lost 2 children in infancy. She had a daughter, Arabella, born stillborn in 1956, and a son, Patrick, who died a few days after birth in 1963, only 3 months before JFK's assassination. Jackie sadly carried this heartache with her until her final days. When Jackie wed Aristotle Onassis, a powerful and wealthy Greek shipping magnate in 1968, people thought she would be leaving tragedy in her past. But not long after they were married, one question started to rise. Did Jackie carry the Kennedy curse with her? In another installment of Cursed Bloodlines, we'll examine the life and tragedies of the Onassis family.